Hello students, in this video we will try to design a differential amplifier with a current mirror load circuit for the specification that is given in this particular table. Okay, yeah. So now before we build this, we have to know what type of input differential pair that has been asked to draw, okay, or asked to design. Now in this case, the question had stated that we're supposed to have a differential amplifier that contains an NMOS input differential pair. Okay, so with that, let us try to first begin drawing the schematic of it, and later we will just see how this different specification would then define the WL factor of each of the transistors that are being used in the schematic. Okay, yeah. So first we'll see the schematic of it. So let me just begin with a current mirror load by making use of PMOS transistor. Let me label them as M3 and M4, and that goes to the NMOS differential input pair, and I'm going to label this NMOS differential input pair as M1 and M2 here. Okay, yeah. So now we know that the source were being connected together for both M1 and M2, and that has to go to a tail current source. Now in this case, we are going to replace this tail current source with a transistor, which is again made use of, built by making use of this NMOS transistor, and let me label this NMOS transistor as M5. And we know that this M5 gate terminal has to be biased with a particular potential. Now in general, when we go for analog IC design circuit, we will not use this direct potential. So rather what we will do is like we'll just try to apply this potential through some sort of current mirroring structure. So in a way, I'll be using some current that I will try to force through a diode connected structure, and this diode connected structure would then forces a particular or provides us a particular voltage that I will be using to drive the VB of this M5 transistor. Okay, so the diode connected structure transistor, I'm going to label it as M6, and if in case the WL aspect of both our M5 and M6 are same, then the current that flows through my M5 is identical to the current that is driven over here through this diode connected structure, right? Yeah. So let me label this tail current as ISS, or that is nothing but that is equal to ID5. Okay, now it would be the same current that would be driven here, provided if the aspect ratio of this M5 and M6 are same. So let me label this current as ISS, assuming that both these transistors have the same aspect ratios. Okay, yeah. So with this, we have done with this circuit, but one important thing is that you could see from the specification that the output of this differential amplifier, which is generally tapped between the drains of M4 and M2, is driven by some sort of capacitive load. Okay, and that capacitive load contains a value which is equal to 10 picofarad. Okay, yeah. So this is one extra thing that we have added based on the specification. It is trying to drive a capacitive load circuit. Okay, yeah. So now let us see how each of these different specifications that were given would then define the aspect ratios of the transistors that are used in this particular schematic. Yeah. So now let us begin with the following steps, so that you will understand from what specification we can directly drive the aspect ratios of the transistors that are used here. Okay, now let us try to go through the specification that is given, and later I will write down the steps. So in this case, the very first parameter says that our power supply is equal to 1.8. So this means that the VDD that I'm using here would be equal to 1.8 volt, and there is a voltage gain that is given to be around 45 dB. Okay, we'll just consider this later. And the next one is the capacity load, which we have already added as 10 picofarad. Okay, so this is all already given, and there is a set of parameter which is called as an ICMR plus and ICMR minus. Okay, so I'll just talk about this. What do we really mean by this ICMR specification, and followed by which we have something known as sleeve rate. Okay, which is given as 5 volt per microsecond, and later we have something known as a power dissipation, which is supposed to be lesser than the value of 300 microwatt. And the final specification states that we have to have a gain bandwidth product as 5 megahertz. Okay, so now we could see that from this power specification we can actually calculate the quantity of ISS. Okay, but also there is one more parameter that defines this ISS, and that parameter is known as this sleeve rate. Okay, so whenever you are being given two specifications or two parameters that could define this ISS, the one that has the highest priority is the sleeve rate. Okay, so whenever you are given the sleeve rate along with power dissipation, or if only the sleeve rate is given, then it is the sleeve rate that takes out the control of defining the current through this tail. Okay, current through this tail current source. Clear? So in case if the sleeve rate is not given, then what you can do is like you can derive the current that flows through this differential amplifier from the power dissipation. But when it is given the sleeve rate, then we have to use the sleeve rate to know the current through this differential amplifier. Okay, yeah, and also you could see that there is something known as a voltage gain that is given as one of the parameter. The other specification is the gain bandwidth. Now the gain bandwidth product is nothing but it's a product of gain into the bandwidth of the circuit. Okay, so whenever you want to calculate the gain of the circuit, there are two specifications that are given. Okay, so among these two specifications, again it is this gain bandwidth product that has to be satisfied than compared to the voltage gain. Okay, so among these two specification, it is the gain bandwidth product that overrides or that has the highest control of defining the aspect ratio than compared to the voltage gain. So again, whenever you are given these two specification, it is this gain bandwidth product specification that you have to take during the computation of this transistors. Okay, I will talk about this, which transistors would then be used for the gain bandwidth product parameter to calculate its aspect ratio. But as of now, you have two specifications, and among these two specifications, it is this gain bandwidth product that takes over the control. And here again, there are two specifications. There is the power dissipation and the sleeve rate. Among these two, it is the sleeve rate that defines these, that takes the highest priority. Okay, yeah. So with that being said, let us try to step out or so let me try to list out the steps that are necessary to calculate the aspect ratios of the transistors that are used in the schematic. Okay, so the very first step is to calculate the tail current ISS from the sleeve rate. Okay, so that would be the first step, and once you calculate that, then we will know the currents that are flowing through each of these branches, which is going to be half of the ISS that would be flowing. Okay, the next thing is to calculate the M3 and the M4 transistors aspect ratios from the ICMR specification. Okay, so we will be calculating this M3 and M4 sizing from ICMR plus specification. Okay, there are two ICMRs. I'll discuss about that, and later we'll be calculating the sizes of this M1 and M2 transistors from what is known as the gain bandwidth product. Okay, so I will write it as GBW as the gain bandwidth product specification. Clear? So as I said, there are two specifications that could be considered, but among these two specifications, it is this gain bandwidth product that takes the priority than compared to the voltage gain specification. Okay, and finally the last step is to calculate the W/L factor of this transistor, right? So we will calculate this W/L ratio of this M5 transistor from what is known as the ICMR minus specification. Okay, so with that being said, we'll just try to calculate these steps. Clear? So step number one, which is to calculate the ISS. Okay, yeah. So what I will do is, like, the explanation of the sleeve rate, I will give a link in the description to know what is sleeving and when does an op amp sleeves and its physical cause for the sleeve. Okay, so all of these things I have explained in a separate video. I will give a link in the description. You can just watch that. But here we will try to use the knowledge which you might have studied in your basic electronic course. Okay, so basically the sleeve rate is a nonlinear phenomena that happens when you apply a large input differential. Okay, when you apply a large input differential input signal to the gates of this M1 and M2 transistor. Okay, and that in turn would causes the entire ISS to flow to either of these two structures. Okay, so you have to watch that video to know what is exactly the sleeve rate, and once you watch that video, then you will understand the physical cause of that, and with that understanding it would be easy for us to calculate here. Okay, but what I do is, like, I'll just try to use the knowledge that we have already studied in the basic electronics to derive this particular thing. Okay, so we know that the sleeve rate can be defined as something like the output dV out with respect to dt. Okay, the maximum rate of change of your output voltage with respect to time is what it defined as sleeve rate, right? So now in this case our V out is being attached to a capacitive load which is CL. Okay, now what I will do next is to write down the current ISS that is flowing through the M5 transistor. Okay, so this ISS can also be defined as what is known as dq by dt, because the current is basically defined as the movement of charge with respect to the time, right? So the change in charge with respect to time is what it defines the current, and also the current through the capacitor. Okay, so while there is a sleeving, the current that flows through the capacitor, either inward or outward depending on the type of the step input that I apply between the differential input pair, okay, defines a current flow, and that current flow would then be equal to ISS. Okay, so generally the current through the capacitor can be defined as ISS that is equal to the capacitive component, the value of the capacitance, into the rate of change of voltage across it. Okay, so since because the capacitor is attached to the node V out, the voltage drop across this capacitor is also equal to VO. So we will utilize that particular principle to define over here. Okay, so it is defined as something like dVO by dt. Okay, it's this is the basic current equation that we will use whenever we deal with the capacitance. Okay, I have utilized that over here, and during the sleeving this voltage rate would be at the maximum, and since because we have already got a definition for this dV out by dt as a sleeve rate, I could substitute that definition over here. Okay, so in the place of this dV out by dt, I can write it as sleeve rate times that of CL, that is equal to ISS. So from here what I can do is, because we know the value of this capacitive load and also we know the value of this sleeve rate, the only thing that is unknown is this ISS. Okay, so we can utilize these two specification to directly calculate the value of this ISS. Okay, so when you just multiply this 10 picofarad, which is this, into the sleeve rate, which is defined as 5 volt per microsecond. Okay, now in this case there is a microsecond that is at the denominator, so due to which what happens is that you end up having this to be equal to 5 micro ampere as its sleeve rate. Okay, so hope that there won't be any confusion with this. Just because there is a micro, when you just bring it to the top it becomes 10 to the power 6, and that when it gets multiplied with this 10 to the power minus 12, we end up having a term which is equal to 10 to the power minus 6, and that is being calculated as micro here. Okay, yeah. So now that we have performed the first step, The next, and since because the total current that flows through this tail current is right now is defined as 50 microampere, under this equilibrium condition, that is when you have this differential input that is equal to 0, then the currents through them, through the M1 and M2 transistors, okay, will be equal to half the value of ISS, which is going to be 25 microampere in each of these branches, okay, provided you have a common mode input that is certainly above this particular range, okay. We'll talk about that, okay. So this is under the equilibrium condition. The currents through the transistor from M1 all the way to M4, we will have a current flow of 25 microamperes under the equilibrium condition when the VID is equal to 0. Clear? Yeah. So now that we know the current, the next step is to calculate the M3 and M4 sizing from ICMR plus. Okay, so before I talk about this ICMR plus, I just want to talk about what is meant by ICMR. Okay, so ICMR stands for input common mode range. Okay, so as the name suggests, it's an input voltage range that we will have, and that input voltage is nothing but it's the common mode input voltage. Okay, so and it is defined as the range of gate input voltage that we will apply over here. Okay, so in this case we will apply some gate input voltage in such a way that there is a range of voltage over which the transistors that are used in this structure doesn't move out of the saturation zone. Okay, so there will be a range of voltages over which all of the transistors that I've used in this structure, in this differential amplifier, will stay inside the saturation zone. Okay, now among this range, the maximum value of that particular range is defined as ICMR plus, and the minimum value of that range is defined as ICMR minus. Okay, hope that it makes sense. So let me write it. Defines the range of common mode input voltage where all the transistors are in saturation region. Okay, so in this, the maximum value of that range is what it defines the ICMR plus. Okay, the maximum of this ICMR range, okay, is what it defines the ICMR plus, and the ICMR minus is nothing but the minimum value in this ICMR range. Okay, there is a range of voltages where all of the transistors are in saturation zone. In this, the maximum value of that range is defined as the ICMR plus, and the minimum value of this ICMR range is defined as ICMR minus. Okay, hope that it makes sense. So now what we will do is, like, we will just use the definition of this ICMR plus. Okay, so now it's all about this input common mode voltage that has been applied to the gates of M1 and M2, right? So we know that whenever we raise this input voltage, okay, because it's a common mode input voltage, means that there is no VID that we are considering here. It is just the VICM. Okay, so when you raise this potential, what happens is that there is a particular point wherein I'll be crossing the potential that I have across the drain. Okay, so there is a minimum potential that I have to maintain between the gate and the drain of this M1 transistor, such a way that this transistor stays in the saturation zone. Okay, so now we would use the edge of saturation condition to define the statement that I made. Okay, so in order to make the M1 as well as the M2 to stay in the saturation zone, we have to satisfy this condition that the gate, the VGS minus VT, supposed to be at least equal to the VDS. Okay, so in this case the source is hanging on both the sides, which we can cancel it. Okay, because we know that this VGS can be written as VG minus VS. Okay, as well as the VDS can be written as VD minus VS. Okay, so we can cancel the source potentials and we end up having the VG minus VT to be equal to VD as the minimum voltage. Okay, because in this case what we are doing is, in the case of ICMR plus, we are trying to increase the gate potential. Okay, at a particular point what would happen is that I might get to a condition where the voltage would then touches the pinch off voltage, which is defined as VDS that is equal to VGS minus VT. Okay, now we are using this pinch off condition to define the maximum voltage. Okay, and if this gate further increases beyond this particular value, then we end up into the linear zone. Clear? So we are using the edge of saturation condition of our M1 and M2 to calculate the ICMR plus. Okay, yeah. So now in this case, right now the gate input is connected to VICM. So I'm replacing this VG with VICM, and I will just try to pull this VD term towards the other side so that I have this VD plus VT of my NMOS transistor. Okay, yeah. So now in this case we just need to know what is the voltage that I have across this drain. So how do we compute that? We know under this common mode input, we know that the currents across both these branches would be same. Okay, in order to have the same currents, the voltage at this particular point and the voltage at this particular node supposed to be the same. Okay, so first let us try to evaluate what is the gate potential that I be having here, or what is the potential at this particular node I need to have. So we know that in order to have the current of 25 microampere to flow across this branch, the M3 transistor has to have a voltage across its gate and source. Okay, we call that voltage to be equal to VGS3. Okay, and I just put modulus just because it's a PMOS transistor, so we'll just have this modulus. Okay, so the total voltage that I be having at this particular node would then be returned as VDD minus VGS3 comma 4. I'm using this comma 4 just because to satisfy, because we have proved in the previous class that in order to under this equilibrium condition, okay, and in order to have the same similar current to flow across both the branches, it is only possible when the drain of this M3 and the drain of our M4 has the same potential. Okay, so with that principle, even the drain of this M4 will also have to have a voltage across the VDS as VGS3. Okay, so due to which I have written it as VDD minus VGS 3 comma 4. Okay, yeah. So this is acting as a kind of drain potential of my M1. Okay, so I'll utilize this formula for the drain of our M1 transistor. Okay, so this is going to be my M1 transistor VD1. Okay, and that voltage is currently equal to VDD minus this VGS 3 comma 4 plus VTN. Okay, now this input voltage is right now at a voltage that is equal to ICMR plus, and from the specification I can get the value of this ICMR plus, and that is equal to 1.6 volt. Okay, so I'm going to use that ICMR value over here, and we know that the value of this supply is basically equal to 1.8. I use that, and we have to calculate this VGS 3 comma 4. Okay, and we know the value of this VTN from the data that is given in the question, which is equal to 0.5. Okay, so I use that over here, which is basically 0.5 here, and we can calculate the only unknown in this particular equation is this VGS 3 comma 4. So after substitution we will end up having the value of this VGS 3 comma 4 as to be equal to 0.7 volt. Okay, so once I get the value of this VGS 3 comma 4, then I know the current that is flowing through this M3 and M4. Maybe I'll just have a copy of this structure so that I no need to keep moving across the pages. So I just put it here. Okay, yeah. So we know that the currents that are flowing through this M3 and M4, and we also know the value of this VGS 3, 4, and since because the currents are flowing and all of the transistors are in the saturation zone, we can use the saturation current equation to calculate the WL aspect ratio of the M3 and M4 from it. Okay, so I'm just using this simple formula. Okay, and I have to into this VGS 3, 4 the whole square. Okay, so the currents that are flowing through the drains of M3 and M4 is going to be 25 microampere. So you can use that value, and I think the calculation that I've done is right. So in case if it is different, you can always comment. Okay, so this value we can approximately get to a value of 83. Okay, so rather than writing it as in terms of decimal, we will try to round the value of this integer as an integer. Okay, so as a fraction I do not want it, and I just convert it in terms of a integer here. Okay, yeah. So we have just performed the step number 2, which helped us to calculate the sizing of this M3 and M4. Okay, so now we will just move on to the next step, which is the calculation of the sizing of this M1 and M2 from the gain bandwidth product. Okay, so step 3 is the calculation of M1 and M2 sizing from gain bandwidth product. Okay, now as the name suggests, the gain bandwidth product is a parameter which is defined as the product of DC gain times the bandwidth of the op amp under consideration. Okay, so basically the GBW is written as DC gain times the bandwidth of the amplifier under consideration. Okay, so in order to evaluate these quantities, what I do is I will just bring the circuit that we have copied earlier over here. Okay, now we know that whenever we talk about this DC gain, we are actually talking about the differential gain here. Okay, and the gain bandwidth product is a particular parameter that is related to the DC gain, sorry, that is related to the differential gain of the circuit. Okay, yeah. So now with that, we know from the previous class, when we apply a differential input signal, we were ending up having the circuit to be a kind of non-symmetric circuit, anti-symmetric circuit. Okay, so this circuit is basically anti-symmetric just because the node at this particular point is completely different from the node at this particular point. Okay, but still, after doing all the manipulation, we came to a final conclusion stating that the circuit can be considered as a symmetric circuit, and we still get the same expression of the gain by assuming the circuit to be symmetric and driving this particular node. Okay, more specifically driving this particular node to be towards the ground. Okay, so now I'm going to use the same principle that we have discussed in the last class to derive the gain of this particular circuit, or to derive the transfer function from the differential input to the output. Okay, so this is what I just want to compute over here, the transfer function. So in order to derive the transfer function, I'm just going to use the small signal model, and then I try to do that. Clear? Yeah. So in a way, I can assume that this particular node, which we generally call it as VP, as a ground, and then I try to derive the transfer function of it. Okay, so considering the circuit to be symmetric across this particular line of symmetry, okay, I'm just going to apply this VID completely towards the gate of my M2 transistor, and then I try to calculate the transfer function of it, okay, between the VID and this VO. So let me begin with one half of the circuit having our M4 and having our M2, and the source of our M2 is right now currently connected to ground based on the previous class discussion. Okay, and then what I do is like I just try to directly apply the VID over here. Okay, so instead of applying VID by 2 here and the other VID by 2 here, I could merge into a single VID and then I can do the same calculation and we would end up having the same result. Okay, there is no change in the results. So that's the reason why we use this half circuit concept to calculate the transfer function of it. Okay, and again this gate voltage is connected to a VB that is derived from the diode connected structure. So what I'm trying to mean here is that there is a DC potential over here. Okay, so whenever we, and also there is a capacitive component that sits here, which I write it as CL. Okay, and this is the structure that I have. Now let us try to draw the small signal model of this. Okay, and from the small signal model we'll try to derive the transfer function of it. Okay, yeah, so now we basically know that when I have a VGS that is non-zero, we will have a current, okay, between the drain and the source of our M2 transistor, so which I'm labeling it here, and for an input voltage that is equal to VID, I have a current which is defined as GM2 times that of VID based on the polarity that I have. Okay, so basically the polarity is a must. You have to write down the polarity of this VGS to draw the current direction, and I am using this polarity, and due to which I draw the current to flow from drain to source. Okay, yeah, and also we know that there is R0 impedances across the drain of M2 as well as across the drain of our M4 transistor. So I just draw those resistances onto my small signal model, the small signal resistances. Okay, yeah, and then what is left over is this capacitor component across the node VO, which also will be added to this small signal model, and this is our VO. Okay, so now what we have to do next is to calculate the transfer function from this VID towards the Vout. Okay, so now this VO is nothing but just by making use of this Ohm's law, we can directly derive the output voltage expression. Okay, so in this there is a total output impedance which can be evaluated as a parallel combination of RO2, RO4 and this impedance imposed by this capacitive load CL. Okay, and the current that flows across this impedance is going to be this component, which is GM2 times that of VID. Okay, so I could write it as the drop across the output impedance Z out. Okay, so here in this case I'm using the Z quantity rather than R quantity, just because the impedance that we have is no more a pure residue network. We will have some sort of impedances coming from the capacitive component. Okay, yeah, so in this I could write it as I out times that of the Z out, and the current that flows through the circuit is basically GM2 times that of VID. Okay, and we still have to calculate this, and we would end up having something like RO2 parallel with RO4 divided by 1 plus the impedance that is imposed by this capacitive load. I could write it as J omega times that of CL, that is the impedance of this capacitive load, times this parallel combination of RO2 and RO4. Okay, so it's a straightforward computation which you would have already learned from your network theory, so I'm not going to redo it here. I've just directly written here. So from here we could calculate the differential gain transfer function as something like minus GM2 times that of RO2, RO4, and then the whole of this gain expression is then divided by a denominator which is given as RO2 parallel with RO4 times that of CL. Okay, yeah, So now this is a type of transfer function which I can write it as something like AD of j omega. Okay, yeah. So now in this case, clearly you could see that there is a DC term that sits here, which is the gain term that I have. Okay, and this acts as my DC gain of the circuit, and there is a kind of denominator term which looks as if like a kind of pole term. Okay, so in the last class we discussed about this pole concept. So one could have a transfer function h of s, and this transfer function can have a DC gain which would reflect this particular quantity. Okay, and it and also have a number of poles which can be written as something like s by omega p1 and s by omega p2 and so on, right? And also it can have a number of zeros which I can write it as something like this. Okay, z1, z2, and in that way. Clear? So obviously when I compare these two expressions, it doesn't have this particular gain expression doesn't have any zeros in it. It only has a DC component which I can map directly to the h naught term, while when I look for the denominator, it has only one single pole which I can map it to this omega p1. So I do not have further poles in my differential gain expression. Okay, so hope that it makes sense. And now this omega p1 I can directly derive just by comparing or just by substituting this s as j omega. So I would end up having something like h naught divided by 1 plus j omega times that of omega p1. Okay, so this is a kind of transfer function that I would end up having. So now when I compare these two expressions, I just want to know what is the value of this omega p1. Now the value of this omega p1 can be directly compared with this denominator, and one could write it as omega p1 to be equal to 1 by CL times that of RO2 times that of RO4. Okay, so now this omega p1 would then act as a kind of bandwidth of the circuit. Okay, so hope that we have all discussed about it. We have plotted this magnitude of our differential gain with respect to frequency and at omega p1. Okay, so till the frequency of this omega p1, one could approximate the gain of the circuit to be constant. Okay, and that value we can make it equal to this quantity. Okay, which I am writing it as just h naught. Okay, and once I reach this particular frequency that is equal to omega p1, then the gain would start degrading at a rate of minus 20 dB per decade. Okay, so this is the concept that we have learned, and generally this omega p1 would then defines the bandwidth of the circuit. Okay, yeah. So now with this, let us try to calculate the gain bandwidth product term. Okay, so gain bandwidth, sorry, I forgot to write this bandwidth term. So gain bandwidth product is nothing but it's a product of DC gain times that of the bandwidth of the circuit. Okay, now the DC gain here is nothing but it's the GM2 times that of RO2 in parallel with RO4. Okay, so that is the DC gain that I would have when I'm not considering the capacitive load CL, right? So that is return and the bandwidth of the circuit. Okay, so now the bandwidth is nothing but it's defined as this term, right? So omega p1, and generally this bandwidth is written in terms of frequency rather than in terms of radians. Okay, so we just have to convert this radian terms in terms of a frequency term. So due to which I try to multiply 2 pi into CL into RO2 in parallel with RO4. Okay, yeah. So now that we can just cancel out some of the common terms, basically the output impedance term, okay, output resistive term, and we end up having a value which is GM2 2 pi times that of CL. Okay, so GBW, gain bandwidth product. Okay, so we end up having this as our definition. So now having got this definition and having got the value of this gain bandwidth product as 5 megahertz, okay, now we know the value of the CL from which we can calculate the value of this GM2. Okay, so I could derive the value of this GM2 as something like GBW times that of 2 pi times that of CL. Okay, so 5 megahertz into 2 pi into 10 picofarad. Okay, so I guess it would end up having a value that is equal to 3.14 into 10 to the power minus 4 Siemens. Okay, so that is the GM of both the transistors of M1 and M2. So I'm writing it as GM1 comma 2 to be equal to this. Okay, so once I got the value of this GM1 comma 2 from the gain bandwidth product specification, then I still have to calculate the aspect ratio of the transistors of M1 and M2, right? So to calculate that, I make use of this GM expression or the current equation, which we write it as half Kn dash W by L and then VGS minus VT square. So the square I'm splitting into two components. Okay, yeah, this is what I have. Now to this, we know that the product of this Kn dash W by L VGS minus VT is nothing but it's equal to our GM. Okay, so to this I further try to multiply and divide with Kn dash W by L. Okay, so the ratio doesn't make any change to our expression. So when I do so, I could have the product of this and the product of this turns out to be the expression for GMs. So I write it as GM1 comma 2 squared with Kn dash W by L at the bottom and ID towards the left side. Okay, so from here I could calculate the aspect ratio of W by L of 1 comma 2 based on the current and based on the value of GM and based on the value of this Kn dash. Okay, so we do have to perform some simple math. Okay, with 2 times ID times that of Kn dash term. Okay, so when you substitute all of these values of the expressions, you end up having a value that is equal to 6.57, I guess. Okay, that you can closely approximate to an integer value of 7. Okay, so with that we have computed the W by L ratio for the M1 and M2 transistors. Okay, the next one we have to perform the fourth step, the final step, which is to calculate the sizing of this tail current. Okay, the sizing of this M5 transistor. So that can be derived from the specification of ICMR minus. Okay, so now let us calculate. Yeah, so now let us try to calculate the M5 aspect ratio. Step 4 is the calculation of M5 sizing from ICMR minus specification. Okay, so now I just have to talk about what is this ICMR expression is going to be. Okay, so due to which I just have to repaste the structure. Now here in this case, in the case of an ICMR minus, we are talking about what is the least amount of voltage that I can apply across this VICM so that the transistors stay in the saturation zone. Okay, now it's the potential that I just want to look as the least value. Okay, so in this case, while reducing this value, I have to ensure that there is a current that is flowing whose value is supposed to be equal to 25 microamperes, for which I need a particular value of VGS for my M1 and M2 transistors. Okay, and along with it, I also have to ensure that while trying to drive the voltage towards the ground potential, okay, we have to ensure a minimum potential across the VDS of our M5 transistor, and that minimum voltage is supposed to be equal to VOV5. Okay, so this is the minimum potential that I have to ensure across the drain and source of my M5 transistor, such that my M5 transistor stays in the saturation zone. Okay, so in general, I could write this VICM minimum voltage to be equal to VGS 1, 2 plus the VDS value, and the minimum value is supposed to be equal to VOV5. Okay, and this would act as my ICMR minus. Okay, and from the specification, I think the my ICMR minus is supposed to be equal to 0.8 volt. Okay, so I use this value for the ICMR minus as 0.8 volt, and we have to calculate this VGS 1, 2 as well as VOV of 5. Okay, now we have already got the value of this WL aspect ratio for those M1 and M2 transistors, and we know the current. The only unknown quantity is the value of this VGS, okay, of the M1 and M2 transistors. So we will first calculate that. So to calculate this VGS 1, 2, I use this formula as 2 ID divided by Kn dash W by L of this 1, 2 plus the threshold voltage, which is out of the square root. Okay, yeah. So when you manipulate this, you end up having a value that is closer to 0.55 volt. Okay, and that value I'm just going to use it here to calculate the value of this VOV of my M5 transistor. Okay, so from here one could extract the value of this VOV5 to be equal to 0.25 volt. Okay, so once I get the value of this VOV5, now I know the current that flows across this M5 transistor, and I also know the value of this VOV. Then you can use the simple current equation, which is ID5 that is equal to ISS, and since because the transistor would be at the edge of saturation under this condition, I use the saturation current equation here, whole square, and when you try to manipulate this whole of this expression, you end up having a value that is closer to 5.5. okay, and you can approximate this quantity to be equal to 6. You can round it up, okay, to an integer value of 6. So with this we have calculated the aspect ratio of all the transistors that are used. Okay, and the one more important thing that we have to still calculate is this aspect ratio of this M6, which is the same as that of our M5. Okay, yeah. So with this I'll stop here. Okay, so we'll see in the next session. Thank you.